of teachers and content, because in the meantime, since we started 3 years ago, the sustainable development narrative has been growing everywhere, also in Italy, and therefore we decided to have the school really making people who will attend it able to make a jump, a leapfrog in terms of policies for sustainable development, business strategies for sustainable development. And the only regret is that we cannot spend, you cannot spend 15 days in a unique place, which is, of course, Siena, and the University of Siena and Santa lab that is led by Angelo Riccaboni, the Santa Chiara lab, is really something that made your predecessors changed at the end of the school. I stop here is just to say that the relationships that are normally established through this school continue over time. The community of alumni of various ASviS schools are growing. 6 more schools will be launched in the next 6 months, devoted to local administrators, regional administrators, start-uppers, and so on and so forth. And joining this school, you will also be joining this incredible network. So thank you again to Angelo, to Cristina, to Simone, and especially to Jeffrey, who accepted to open this school this year. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor Giovannini. The floor is for Professor Riccaboni.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm very pleased here to open the school with Enrico and giving the floor to Jeffrey. Just a few words on Jeffrey Sachs. Everybody knows Jeffrey Sachs, but just to say that he's the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and he has been SDG advocate for special advisor for the 3 UN Secretaries General. And now he's the chair of the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, which is a very important commission devoted to study the consequences of COVID-19 on our societies. Jeffrey Sachs has played, and he is playing, a key role in the promotion of Agenda 2030, both in his office as president of Sustainable Development Solutions Network, but also with other many activities. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank him for his leadership in this major world change, and also for his strong commitment and for the results he's achieving. Our edition this year, as Enrico said, is we call it Advanced School because we really raised the bar. And in particular, we all know that we need to focus on transformations. We cannot rely upon just small progresses or small changes. We need transformations. So for this reason, we ask each teacher at the school to intervene and to talk about which are the activities in terms of prevention, preparedness, and resilience for each of the topics that will be taught in the school. And also because of the pandemic, we have a series of webinars, and we will have 11 webinars every Tuesday and 11 workshops. So we make our students work a lot because we are sure that we have a talent in the school and we would like to see good results at the end. At the end, we will have in January a session where they will be here in Siena, January 22nd, 26th, and they will work together, hopeless, and hopefully they will have case studies, field visits, active workshops here in Siena. And we hope that will be a good opportunity to take advantage of a unique city with its social and environmental patrimony and with its unique cultural heritage. And we all know that Siena is one of the icons of the sustainability worldwide, also because of the world famous Fresco by Lorenzetti, 1338, on good government, bad government, and the consequences of good government and bad government on the city and the countryside, which was really anticipatory of things we are discussing nowadays. So I'm very, very pleased of this opportunity, and I would like also to take this occasion to thank a lot Enrico Giovannini, because this partnership with ASviS for us is extremely important. And Enrico is really a key leader in Italy in the promotion of Agenda 2030. And his invention, which is the ASviS, Alleanza for the Sustainable Development, is really, really a key player in the Italian countryside in order to promote 17 SDGs. So really is something remarkable. I would like also thank our students, 46 students coming from research centers, institutions, business. So we are really pleased that we have found this year a very high-level audience. Last but not least, we need to thank our sponsors, in particular Enel Foundation and Leonardo, and also the other partners like the Italian Network of Universities for Sustainability, SDSN Italy, led by our common friend Sabina Ratti, SDSN Mediterranean, but also Expo 2020. We are working very closely with Expo 2020, the Italian pavilion, and we are very pleased of this partnership. So thanks a lot, Enrico. Thanks a lot, really, Jeffrey, for having found time to be with us today. Now I leave the floor to Simone and then to our great friend and world leader, Jeffrey Sachs. Simone, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Riccaboni. I leave the floor to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, saying that at the end of your lecture, we are collecting a few questions from students. So if you would be so kind to answer to the questions, we are really happy. So the floor is yours, Professor Sachs. Thank you very much again.
Thanks to all of you. Greetings to all of the students, first and foremost. Thanks to Enrico, to Angelo, and to Simone for letting me be part of this important program. There's so much to discuss because the world is really in a complicated time. And I do want to make sure that we leave some time for question and answer. So I will be only touching, in fact, I think some main themes rather briefly so that we have time for an interchange. Well, 2020 is a tremendously great upheaval in the world. Obviously, we would not be in the situation we're in today but for a pandemic and massive consequences that has been described by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres as the biggest global disruption since World War II, and economically as the biggest disruption since the Great Depression of the 1930s. That's the scale of history that you are living through right now, that we are all living through right now. It's a very tumultuous period. It's a very dangerous period, politically and geopolitically as well. And a lot rides, sad to say, on US politics, which are in terrible shape. But with a US national election on November 3, just 1 month from now, a tremendous amount depends, and not only on inside the United States, but unfortunately worldwide. If the whole world could vote in the election, that would be good. There would be no chance that Donald Trump would be returned to office. I think the world would be very relieved to see him go. And I sure will be incredibly relieved to see Donald Trump defeated if that happens. If he is in some way able to stay in power, either through fraud or disruption or by a vote itself, the dangers that I'm going to be discussing will be far higher and far more unpredictable, in fact. The problem starts even before the epidemic because our world was not in safe shape by any means, economic, social, environmental, or political, even before the pandemic began. Though it perhaps wasn't seen to be in great danger, I felt it to be in great danger. Economically, we had huge divisions between the rich and the poor that were tending to widen within many societies, including in Europe and in the United States, inside China, and in which some countries were achieving some economic progress, but many, many others were stagnant or in crisis that was leaving them farther and farther away from prosperity. That was true even before the pandemic. We had, therefore, large areas suffering from poverty. We had widening income inequalities. We had widening social instabilities. At the same time, of course, were widespread environmental crises. I used to say a year ago, 3. Climate change caused by human emissions of greenhouse gases, the loss of biodiversity caused mainly by the destruction of habitat related to agriculture primarily, but also to urbanization or to infrastructure development. And the third, massive pollution of everything, air pollution, water pollution, ocean pollution, plastics pollution, soil pollution, and so on, because of the very heavy use of chemicals of all kinds in our economic system, because of the massive waste flows, the massive use of single-use plastics, and so on. Now we can see we have, and in fact, we knew it, a fourth environmental crisis, and that is the emerging infectious diseases that are hitting the world every 2 or 3 years that are like COVID-19, resulting principally from some kind of incursions of human activity into animal populations that then result in a zoonotic event where a pathogen transfers from the animal population to the human population. And this is now happening regularly, though COVID-19 is the worst of these in modern times. This kind of zoonosis, or transfer of pathogens from the environment to humans, is what caused the AIDS epidemic. That was a transfer of a virus, the simian immunodeficiency virus, to humans, which became HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, somewhere in West Africa, probably about 100 years ago. Then SARS, we had in the year 2000, which was, again, a bat coronavirus that infected humans and began to spread. But it was relatively straightforward to control, even though it was very frightening, because people had symptoms for many days before they became infectious to others, making it easier to identify the cases and then to isolate them. Then we had the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS. We had the Nipah virus. We had the H1N1 recombinant virus. We had the emergence of Zika virus, especially in the Americas. We had the intensification of dengue fever, largely because of climate change. That wasn't a new zoonotic event, but a more widespread incidence of the epidemic. And now we've had COVID-19, which is probably the transfer of this SARS-CoV-2 virus, the coronavirus of COVID-19, probably in Southwest China, in Hunan province, perhaps, but from horseshoe bats to humans sometime. Now it's thought maybe 10 or 20 years ago, but not diagnosed. And it has become now a global pandemic. So we have multiple crises. And as Professor Riccoboni said, we have a fundamental challenge of governance of crises. And as Lorenzetti depicted in the City Hall of Siena, if there is bad governance, then these crises end up as famines. They end up as social instability. They end up as ongoing pandemic diseases. If there is good governance, we solve these problems. We solve these problems through public policy. For example, the provision of public services, health, education, infrastructure to protect everybody or to ensure access for everybody to basic needs. And we take effective public interventions, quarantine, for example, which was invented in Italy, the 40 days of isolation when ships carrying plague would arrive in Venice or other ports to prevent the onward epidemic transmission from occurring. So we're really in a struggle of good governance and bad governance. And what all of these crises have shown us is just how fragile our governance is. In the United States, we have the worst president in our history. Vice President Biden was not exaggerating when he said that in the debate a couple of days ago. Trump is a psychopath. He's a mentally ill person that gained power. This is not the first time this has happened, but it is the first time in the United States it happened. And we're not so used to this. He has a propaganda machine, which is the Rupert Murdoch media empire, the Wall Street Journal for the more sophisticated readers, Fox News for the less educated population and older population. And it's a nonstop propaganda network for the President of the United States, who happens to be a malevolent, paranoid, sadistic individual. And so we have the worst of the governance, as in Lorenzetti's picture. And in the United States, we have bigger inequalities than at any time in our history. We have a complete inability in our politics to have a coherent approach to controlling the pandemic disease. And even before the pandemic, Trump was the leading figure against taking any action on climate change. In fact, quite the contrary. His whole administration since January 2017 has been based on promoting fossil fuels, doing everything by regulation and by legislation and the federal budget to subsidize fossil fuels and promote their use and stop environmental controls in the interests of God knows what exactly, but mainly short-term profits of ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, and others, which are his big campaign backers and part of the reason for the Republican Party's electoral support, the backing of the oil, gas, and coal industry. So we're facing multiple challenges at the same time as a profound political crisis in many countries. And Trump, of course, promoted others of his kind. He tried to break up the European Union as best the United States could. He has promoted Brexit. He promoted the populist demagogic leaders across Europe. He promoted Bolsonaro in Brazil, who is a Trump-like figure in Brazil, both unwilling to control the pandemic and unwilling to face up to the destruction of the Amazon and unwilling to confront the challenges of climate change. So we have Trump-like figures in many places in the world. And in this sense, we can see that while we have tremendous challenges, at the core of these challenges is really a governance challenge. What determines the direction that society will take? Can we make the collective actions that are necessary to solve our problems? Can we act rationally in a collective effort to provide public goods? Or are we, in essence, left in a war of all against all, belli omni contra omni, as the last recourse of our societies? And I would say one of the striking points of 2020 was that individual countries, though quite rich, of Western Europe, the United States, and others have done very badly on the test of governance. Though I am very relieved to say that the European Union as a whole has rallied in the period of crisis to reassert a kind of rationality in response to the crisis at the level of the European Union. This is surely the single most important and positive development of all in the world, is that Europe at the European-wide level has found a way to adopt a European-wide strategy, the European Green Deal, and we hope more effective means to recover from the pandemic than has been the case in individual countries where politics has been very, very poor in the pandemic response. The problem that we face of growing inequalities, growing social instability, and growing political tensions is that these crises cannot be solved by market forces alone or by the decentralized actions of businesses, no matter how well motivated they are. They do require collective action at many levels, at the level of cities and provinces within countries, at the level of the nation state, at the regional level, for example, Europe or the African Union or ASEAN and so forth, and at the global level through multilateral cooperation, through a shared commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. In other words, we need public goods and public services that are provided not by individual businesses alone or by our personal voluntary efforts, but by our collective action for the common good. And that, again, brings us back to Lorenzetti. We need government that is functional and able to respond to the challenges. When you think about the challenges at a technical level, which is the first step of rationality, asking what should be done to achieve particular goals, The good news is that at the technical, rational, instrumental level, connecting means to goals, these are solvable problems. In other words, the pandemic itself can be suppressed. And it's interesting that China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Australia, and New Zealand have all successfully suppressed the same virus that we in Western Europe and the United States and the Americas more generally, and now in India, have not been able to suppress. So governance has been successful in countries of the Asia Pacific with about 2 billion population, but not successful in the countries of Western Europe and the Americas and India right now, with roughly 3 billion population. And then the situation is still uncertain in the remaining part of the world, parts of Africa and other parts of Asia, where we're not sure exactly whether the epidemic is being suppressed or not. The technical means exist, but the question is the quality of governance. And to come back to my crazy country, the United States, we've not had one day of coherent national leadership, not one day when President Trump spoke honestly and directly to the American people to explain the pandemic, how it is transmitted, how we can stop the transmission by wearing face masks, by physical distancing, by stopping large gatherings, by closing major group events, by testing and tracing contacts. We've not had one day since the beginning of March of that kind of coherent, rational response. Trump is an idiot and absolutely a psychopath. And this is a shocking thing, but it's true. This happens in society. Usually it happens when they're already pretty sick, so that a sick person can come to power. And that's what's happened in the United States. He is an extraordinarily dangerous person. But many of his allies don't want to say it. They don't recognize it. They think he's just a little odd or Machiavellian politician. But he's truly the worst imaginable. And this, again, makes it extremely difficult to have any kind of life-saving, minimal steps taken, much less the kind of serious, coherent policies that are needed, in fact, to suppress the pandemic. Well, similarly, if you look at the other parts of the Sustainable Development Agenda, it's feasible to achieve them. Take the question of human-induced climate change, which is driven overwhelmingly by the carbon dioxide emissions from the use of fossil fuels and from the deforestation of the major tropical forests, the Amazon, the Congo Basin, and the Indonesian islands, and the burning of peat in Southeast Asia. Well, again, these are very solvable problems. What is needed is to decarbonize the energy system by shifting the primary energy sources from coal, oil, and natural gas to wind, solar, hydropower, geothermal, maybe some advanced biofuels, but essentially to move from a carbon-based energy system to a very low carbon or zero carbon energy system. And some countries are doing that successfully, just like some countries have successfully stopped the pandemic. There's nothing miraculous about doing it because the technologies are known. The costs of renewable energy are already quite low compared to the fossil fuel alternatives. We can move from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles in a period of 10 to 20 years. We can move from home heating based on coal or heating oil to home heating based on electricity in a period of 25 to 30 years. In other words, if we chart a course from where we are today to 2050, choose a path of decarbonization, there's nothing financially, economically, technologically unfeasible about such a trajectory to get to 2050. What stops us? Basically, politics. In the United States, again, we don't even try to do this at the national level because the fossil fuel lobby, the big companies, have been so powerful, they are so deceitful, they fund the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is a party of mass corruption. The Democratic Party is a party of half corruption. The Republican Party, in my view, is a party of full-out corruption. And the result is that we have no coherence of our national politics. Well, I like to think about the technical transformations because I'm a technocrat. I'm a technician. I like to understand what should we do? How could this be done? And then to think about the politics. How can this actually be implemented? At SDSN, we've been developing the idea that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement can be described as 6 major transformations. The first one is the transformation of education and skills for a 21st century digital society. Every child getting an education needed to live in 21st century technology. The second transformation is universal access to a health system that includes both public health and hospital-based or facilities-based health. We thought we had it, but it turned out we didn't have public health implemented in our societies. We didn't have surveillance. We didn't have testing and tracing capacities. We didn't have physical distancing capabilities and awareness of the population. So we had partial health system, but not truly a comprehensive health system. And in other parts of the world, of course, they don't even have the basics of facilities or the public health capacities. The third big transformation is clean energy and industry, meaning decarbonize the energy system and shift industry to a circular economy so that pollution is either turned into recycled inputs or eliminated through changes of material processing. The fourth transformation is to sustainable agriculture and sustainable land use, to stop using an extensive margin where you just chop down the trees to get new land, and you move to a more precision agriculture within given boundaries to stop invading the rest of the ecosystems and thereby to stop pandemic diseases from emerging, to stop the deforestation, and to protect the habitats of other species. The fifth transformation is sustainable cities. And here, Italy has a great experience. Your cities go back roughly 3,000 years or so, and they have proven to be sustainable. They've had ups and downs, but Rome is the eternal city. And it is notable that the Civita Eterna was named the Eternal City not recently, but in the 1st century BC. So the tradition of sustainable cities goes back at least 2,000 years, and we have a lot to learn. And Angelo, Professor Riccoboni, has been writing to me with ideas about studying smaller cities and how they can live compatibly with the countryside in more sustainable ways. And I think this is a very important part of the transformation. What should our cities look like in the future? How can they be more sustainable? What is the proper urban-rural balance for protecting both city life and rural life in a more socially balanced manner, in more healthful diets, and more resilient agriculture? The 6th transformation is technology, especially the digital technologies. We've moved in the last 10 months, roughly 10 years of digital transformation. So what would have taken to the year 2030 is going to take till the end of the year 2020 in terms of moving businesses online, moving our education online, moving healthcare online, moving governance online, moving services online, moving commerce online. It's happened because of the pandemic at a rate that is accelerated by at least factor 10, I would say. And the online societies are thriving actually right now, whereas the physical economies are in very deep crisis. But more than that, we have a major challenge of managing the digital world so that it doesn't become the world of fake news, cyber warfare, loss of privacy, biased artificial intelligence systems, and so forth, but actually becomes tools that are good for humanity. And Europe, again, has taken a lead with the GDPR on data protection. The rest of the world hasn't even started in this, really. And we have a big challenge of governance ahead. So my answer, and I'll stop here so that we can have some discussion, is that even before COVID, we had a global crisis. That's why governments adopted sustainable development as their framework. The crises were social exclusion, widening inequalities, billions of people left behind, and fulminant environmental crises. COVID has made all of this dramatically worse because the inequalities are bigger than ever. The gap between the online economy and the brick and mortar economy is wider than ever. The social inequalities are huge. The environmental crises have continued to deepen. And so everything that we were fighting before is even worse now. I'll just close by emphasizing one more point, that to solve these problems, we need cooperation, because the public goods that are needed are not only at the local or the national level, they are necessarily at the regional level, say a European energy system, and at the global level, all countries abiding by the Paris Climate Agreement, for example. Trump, you probably guessed by now, I don't like him very much. Trump is trying to create a Cold War with China and trying to weaken the multilateral system. The US has pulled out of the World Health Organization, UNESCO, the Paris Climate Agreement, the agreement on denuclearization with the government of Iran, the Human Rights Council, and others. And so this is another part of Trump's madness and danger, because a person like that can endanger the whole world. through the attack on peaceful, cooperative multilateralism. That's all to say how important it is that we end his political career on November 3 next month. If we can do so, the United States can be back as a partner with Europe. We can not have a Cold War with China, but actually cooperate. And I note that China announced in President Xi Jinping's speech at the UN last week that China would decarbonize its energy system by 2060. Very good announcement. I want to move it even faster to 2050, but very good progress made that we need to build on through a cooperative effort. Let me leave it at this level, and I look forward to the questions. Thanks.
Well, so thank you very much. I asked to the students to raise questions, and if you would like to use the chat in order to raise questions, we can select some of them in order to ask to Professor Jeffrey Sachs. So we have the first questions. Do you think that the matter of transformation is mainly a matter of public opinion? The public opinion refused to accept the challenge of climate change. There is nothing more to do. Which could be the means to trigger definitely the process of transformation starting from the mass opinion? So this is the first question.
Great. Thanks a lot. The problem is not primarily public opinion. Even, say, in the United States, on almost every survey, roughly 2/3 or even 3/4 of the public say that climate change is a significant issue that needs to be addressed. And similar proportions, 65 to 75%, say we should make the transfer from fossil fuels to clean energy. The problem is mainly the power of incumbent, concentrated interests, corporate interests, and regional interests that prevent action. So Trump is not representing a majority view when he opposes action on climate change. He's representing a corporate view, and perhaps one could say the views of some concentrated geographic areas that are with lots of employment in one or more of the fossil fuel sectors. But our politics in the United States doesn't work on public opinion. It works on a vote of Congress or an executive decree by a president, not by a referendum or by an opinion survey. And in many of our policies right now, the public is absolutely against what happens, but the government is still able to act. And Trump, after all, did not even receive a majority of the votes. He got fewer votes than his opponent in 2016, but because of the strange ways that the US political system works, he was able to govern. And almost everything that he does in governance is by decree, not by legislation. So most of it is by decree. He's a kind of dictator in between elections. And if we miss the chance during the election of getting rid of him, we absolutely will have no chance of making significant progress or any progress perhaps on climate change in the United States during his term.
very much for your answer. We have quite a few questions, so we will have to select them. Sorry that. Sorry for the students, actually. There's a question saying, do you think that the matter of transformation is mainly a matter of public opinion? Or public opinion refuse to accept a challenge? Oh, sorry, that.
Yeah, I think it's but let me say something about that more generally, which is that the public is generally not well informed about the technical issues involved, and is not generally the obstacle to change also if these issues are able to be presented and discussed in a clear way, if the political system allows that, and if those who can define technical approaches are encouraged to do so. My preferred way of doing politics is actually to lay out a solution. I believe the solutions are important to present to the public, not only because they are solutions, but also to show that things are politically better to go in one direction than another. And therefore, the whole approach that I recommend is showing the paths to solving our problems. It doesn't work by any means in a guaranteed way, because in the United States, for example, many people, including myself, have shown how we could reduce the deaths from COVID-19. Trump, for the bizarre reasons actually of his individual character, which is mentally ill, is unable and unwilling and uninterested in taking up the solutions. So presenting solutions is by no means assured, but I do think that it's an important part of politics to show this is a way that something can work. Because remember, most of these issues are quite complex. They actually require a lot of study, which is why you're in an advanced program to study them. They are not something that comes through intuition alone. They require a lot of analysis and modeling. But our societies need to be able to make complex choices. So they need to be able to look to expertise as well as to have a sophisticated level of deliberation. We ought to banish Twitter from the policy world. It's useless. I got off Twitter myself a couple of years ago. I couldn't be more pleased that I did so, because you don't win politics by tweets of the kind of politics that we need. You win politics by long, boring studies that are then seriously discussed in the public, because this is the nature of the problems that we're facing. They are more complex. But it doesn't mean that they can't be understood and adopted, because all around people see the challenges and people do want to know what the solutions are.
Yes, okay. We have a question from Fabio. Fabio say, to tackle the climate emergency and the challenges you mentioned, we need as consumers to shift our current consumption behaviors to more sustainable ones and to avoid certain things altogether. On the avoid part, particularly, we know there is a lot of skepticism of the growth, but wouldn't avoiding, in fact, mean the growth? What's your take on that?
This is a very interesting question, and I have an answer that isn't probably the same as many others, because I don't look to personal behavior as the main solution to this challenge. And I'll explain why. I like the fact that we are having this video chat right now, and my computer is plugged into the power in order to make sure that it stays on. I turned on the lights this morning. I prepared my breakfast with refrigerated milk, so I liked the energy and needed the energy for a safe morning breakfast. I'm going to get some goods probably delivered by e-commerce during the day. They will have come by airplane, or they'll come by car to a warehouse. They'll be dropped off by a truck, probably an Amazon truck, and so on. I rather like this world and want to see if we can sustain the benefits of electrification, transport, aviation, and the like, not to end it. Now, my feeling is the answer is overwhelmingly yes, because when I've studied this question, I am very much convinced that we can turn on the lights, run our refrigerators, run on our computers sustainably with solar power and wind power. We don't have to stop the use of these power of electricity. We have to change the technology. I'm very much convinced that the van of Amazon that's going to bring something to me today could be run on electric vehicles powered by zero carbon energy, and on and on. In other words, we live in systems of technology. The internet, the connectivity, the broadband, the electrification, the safe water, the sewerage, and so on. The predominant thing that we need to do, I believe, is to be good citizens, to insist that those systems be transformed into sustainable systems. That's at the level operationally of the utilities companies, for example, that provide the power. So it's at the level of Enel, for example, that the electricity that Enel provides is zero carbon power. But why not? There are no technological obstacles to that. And that is what the European Green Deal, in fact, says. So I would like to make our systems in which we live and which provide us with such crucial services and such potential quality of life, I would like to make those systems sustainable. When there is no alternative but a significant change of our behavior, by all means, we should do that. One possible area for that, in fact, I would say likely area for that, is a change of diet to more plant-based proteins and lower diet of meat-based proteins. This is, by almost all analysis, part of the job of saving the ecosystems, because cattle really is a major user of resources, and often very unsustainably so. So there are areas where individual behavior makes a difference, but I think the most important area of individual behavior is, as citizens, to ensure that collectively together we are enforcing sustainability on our technological and corporate economy, which provides the bulk of the goods and services on which we live. And from an analytical point of view, it's up to us to study how those systems can be transformed. And I believe they can be. In fact, I'm a great believer that the digital technologies enable us to have far more energy efficiency, far more resource efficiency, far lower use of direct primary commodity inputs from the ecosystems if we use these new technologies in an effective way.
Thank you very much, Professor. Would it be okay to have two more questions?
Sure, let's do that.
Thank you. As you touched on the European Union in your last answer, I see there are several questions on the European Union, of course. I'll read this one from Marco. which summarizes pretty much most questions. You mentioned EU as an example for the Green New Deal. Can the European Union take the world's lead in sustainable development and stimulate a new global commitment? If yes, what's needed for the EU to do so?
The European Green Deal is really important in my view, and it's really worth study because it is a comprehensive part of the transformations that I mentioned. It doesn't cover all of them. It doesn't really cover the education sector. It doesn't cover the health sector, but it does cover the energy transformation, the industry transformation, and the land use transformation, and to an important extent, the digital transformation. So it's a big part of these solutions. Most importantly, it sets 2030 and 2050 goals for Europe with specific timelines and objectives and methods to monitor and to achieve those objectives. So it sets climate neutrality or net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 in the energy transformation. It has a circular economy pillar to reduce pollutants, and it has the so-called farm to fork strategy for sustainable agriculture and sustainable and healthful nutrition. So it's comprehensive, it goes out to 2050, it is sustainable development based. In this sense, Europe is in the lead. Last week, President Xi Jinping announced that China would decarbonize by 2060. This is the result, in my opinion, of Europe's successful diplomacy. In fact, Europe explicitly challenged China to make such a commitment. And I believe that this is the reason that President Xi made this commitment. So Europe, in my view, has the lead. Of course, for that, Europe needs to be strong, well-financed, strongly backed politically and culturally within Europe to fight against the nationalists and the demagogues and the populists that were attacking Europe. But with it, Europe really has the most advanced program for transformation. And if Biden is elected, the US will come alongside Europe. So this is a very important potential step because we could have by mid-November, if things go well politically, the EU, China, and the United States all aligned on deep decarbonization. This would be a huge breakthrough for the world. It would feel a lot better than it does today.
So we have the last question from Alberto about the private sector. So with reference to the commitment of private companies to achieve the sustainable development goals, on which management factors do you think it's more urgent for companies to work? For example, convert their business models, introduce SDGs target into business strategic planning, or invest financial capital in SDG projects? This is the question.
Great. So first of all, thanks to the Italian business community because it's been a major leader in rethinking the role of corporations in precisely the area of long-term sustainability. And I really mean this because I work with the business sectors all over the world. The Italian business sector has become the most organized, vocal, clear sector of saying we need to be aligned with sustainable development. And companies like Lavazza, like Illy, like Barilla, like have all played a hugely positive role. Though an oil company has been very clear about the need to decarbonize by 2050, and its foundation, the Fondazione Enrico Mattei, has been an incredible partner in charting the ways forward to 2050. So I think that there's something really special about the Italian businesses and the environment, and I know that the work that many people on the line, including Professor Riccoboni and Rico, have done, and Sabina Ratti, and many others, Mario Cerruti at Lavazza, have all played a huge role in raising the awareness of the Italian businesses, and many family businesses have played a very important role. What I would say is most important in this is the alignment of the basic business strategy with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And in that alignment, the main rule is do no harm. Stop practices that are harmful for society. And what do I mean by that? We have been pioneering together with Professor Riccoboni and the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition 4 questions that businesses should ask themselves for alignment with sustainable development. The first is my product a good, healthful product? Or am I selling dangerous food or dangerous energy or dangerous health? And so this is the first point. The second point is my production process environmentally and socially sustainable? The third question is, are my partners in the value chain, upstream and downstream, also acting sustainably? Or am I buying products from places with child labor, for example, which should be eliminated? And the fourth is, am I a good corporate citizen? Meaning, do I pay taxes honestly? Do I report transparently? Am I dealing with my staff according to the principles of non-discrimination and sustainable development and so forth? So these are the 4 main questions: product, process, value chain, and citizenship that come to important alignment. We're going to have a conference actually in just a few days in Parma on sustainable business, an online conference. Maybe some of the students can listen in, but it's really about making this alignment work. And I think that if businesses do this, this will have a huge effect, but also it's true, good for business. Because if businesses try to operate against these goals, they will in the end suffer, because the world will move faster or slower to sustainable development, and businesses that fight against it are going to be fighting against a force that will knock them out in the end. That's what's happened to the frackers and the oil industry in the United States. They're going bankrupt, and the coal industry, it's going bankrupt because they bet against sustainable development, and that is not a bet that I would recommend to any business. I'm just noticing I am actually called to another video right away, so I'm late. So I wanted to stay on for more, but I really am going to have to depart quickly.
So thank you very much, Professor Sachs, for your intervention. I leave the floor to Professor Angelo Riccoboni for closing remarks for today. Thank you very much again.
So thanks, Jeff, for your intervention. Inspirational as usual, very, very important for us and for our students. I'm sure that after this great, wonderful, inspiring speech, our school has a wonderful start and everything will flow very well. Just a few remarks, just to summarize what you said. First, problems started before the pandemics, and COVID made everything worse. Second, the importance of collective action. So SDG 17, we need to work at different levels, and you highlighted the role of the European Union. We in Europe very often complain about Europe. You have a very wide vision, and you underscored that is very important what Europe is doing. So maybe Europeans should be more aware of the importance of Europe. Third, the key role of government. and that is very important as well, because technical means are available, often is an issue of political and governmental will. Fourth, business can give a contribution, and we should be very pleased that Italian companies are at the forefront of this journey. So great. I would like to close, say that in January we will have classes here in Siena, and when we will organize a class under the fresco of the good government, we all remind your words and your references to such a fresco. So thanks a lot, Jeff, for your contribution, and looking forward for the next occasions. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks to you. Thanks to all the students. Really great to be with you, and to Enrico.
Thank you.
Concludo brevemente, grazie a tutti per la partecipazione, spero che sia stato veramente un buon inizio di questa scuola. Mi dispiace di non aver potuto porre al professor Sachs tutte le domande che sono arrivate in chat, magari le teniamo per animare una discussione durante il primo workshop che faremo. Ricordo martedì 6 ottobre il prossimo webinar alle 5 di pomeriggio, stessa ora, Gianfranco Bologna, WWF. Lascio a Cristina l'onere ed onore di chiudere questa sessione.
Grazie Simone, spero sia stata una lezione splendida, per me sicuramente lo è stata. Ringrazio il professor Riccaboni e naturalmente il professor Giovannini per essere stati con noi in momenti anche questi molto, molto pieni. Vi aspettiamo tutti quindi martedì e poi giovedì per i workshop più di progetto, quindi buon inizio a tutti gli studenti e a tutti i docenti. Grazie.
Grazie, ciao, grazie a tutti.
Ciao a tutti.
Grazie.
Ciao a tutti.
Grazie a tutti.